My phone lit up with 50 texts in 10 seconds, all saying the same thing. Delete everything now. I was in the middle of bench pressing 185 when my phone started convulsing on the gym floor like it was having a seizure. Coach Murphy yelled at me to focus on my form, but then his phone went off too. Then every phone in the weight room erupted at once, a wall of notification sounds bouncing off the concrete walls. I racked the bar and grabbed my phone. 50 messages in 10 seconds, all from different people. Football team, debate club, kids I barely knew. Every single message identical. Delete everything now. My chest tightened. I scrolled through the list. Khalil, my best friend since middle school. Nora from photography club. Devin from calc. Maya, who I'd hooked up with once at a party. Even my ex-girlfriend Sienna, who hadn't spoken to me in 6 months. All saying the same thing. Coach Murphy blew his whistle, and the sharp sound cut through the chaos. Phones down. Everyone to the main gym. Now. His face had gone gray. In 15 years of coaching, I'd never seen Coach Murphy look scared. Until today. We jogged to the main gym where the entire school was being herded by teachers who looked like they'd just witnessed a murder. Principal Hayes stood at center court with 2 police officers flanking him. The crowd noise was deafening. Hundreds of students talking over each other, trying to figure out what was happening. Hayes held up his hands for silence, but nobody stopped talking. One of the officers, a tall woman with her hair in a severe bun, stepped forward and shouted, "Quiet! Right now!" The gym fell silent instantly. Hayes' voice shook when he spoke. "There has been a serious security breach involving school property and student safety. We're asking everyone to power down their phones immediately and hand them to security staff who will be coming around with collection bins. You'll get them back at the end of the day." The gym exploded in protests. People shouting that they had rights, that this was illegal, that their parents would sue. The female officer stepped forward again. "This is not optional. Anyone who refuses will be escorted from the building and their parents will be contacted by police." I looked at Khalil standing next to me. His face had gone completely white. I'd known Khalil since we were 12 years old. We'd been through everything together. I could read his expressions better than my own. Right now, his expression said he knew exactly what this was about. I leaned close and whispered, "What's happening?" He shook his head, wouldn't meet my eyes. Security guards started moving through the crowd with plastic bins. Students reluctantly dropped their phones in, some crying, others arguing. When the guard reached me, I hesitated. Khalil grabbed my wrist hard enough to hurt. "Delete it first," he hissed. "Delete what?" But he'd already turned away. I pulled up my phone and opened my messages. Nothing unusual. Opened Instagram, normal feed, Snapchat, TikTok, all normal. Then I saw my email icon had 17 new messages, all from the same address. RiverdaleLeaks@protonmail.com. The subject lines were all identical. "You have 10 minutes. I clicked on the most recent one. The email contained a single link to a shared drive folder. No text, no explanation, just the link. My finger hovered over it. The security guard cleared his throat impatiently. I clicked the link. The drive opened to a folder titled Senior Trip Evidence. My stomach dropped. Last month, the entire senior class had gone on a trip to Washington, D.C. for a week. It was supposed to be educational, visiting monuments and museums, meeting with politicians. But it had also been a week away from parents, where people had done things they shouldn't have done. I'd set up the original shared drive for trip photos, just a place where everyone could dump their pictures so we'd all have memories. This new folder wasn't part of that original structure. Someone had created it this morning at 9:17 a.m. Inside were video files, dozens of them. I clicked on the first one, and the image that loaded made my blood freeze. It was surveillance footage from inside a hotel room. I recognized Destiny Williams immediately, student body president, straight A student, headed to Georgetown in the fall. She was with 2 other girls, Jasmine Torres and Alicia Kim. They were drinking, which wasn't shocking. Everyone had been drinking on that trip. But then the door opened, and Mr. Brennan walked in. Mr. Brennan, our history teacher, everyone's favorite. The guy who made learning about wars and treaties feel like watching an action movie. He was carrying a bottle and smiling. The security guard snatched the phone from my hand before I could see more. "Nice try, kid. Bin, now." I dropped it in without argument, my mind racing. The video had been time-stamped 11:43 p.m., day 3 of the trip. I remembered that night. A bunch of us had been hanging out in the hotel courtyard, playing cards, talking. Mr. Brennan had been there earlier, joking around with everyone. But around 11 p.m., he'd disappeared. Said he needed to do a room check, make sure everyone was following curfew. Nobody had thought anything of it. They herded us into the cafeteria after collecting all our phones. The administration was trying to keep us contained while they figured out what to do. Teachers stood at all the exits, preventing anyone from leaving. Through the windows, I could see police cars pulling up. Not campus security, actual city police. Multiple units. A news van pulled into the parking lot, then another. Within minutes, there were 4 news trucks outside, reporters setting up cameras. Whatever was happening, it was already public. The school couldn't contain it anymore. Khalil sat next to me, his knee bouncing rapidly under the table. "You saw it," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. I nodded. "How much?" One video, Brennan going into a room with Destiny and the others. They were drinking. Khalil's jaw clenched. There's more. A lot more. Someone leaked everything. Every room. Every night. All the footage Brennan recorded. My brain couldn't process what he was saying. What do you mean Brennan recorded? Why would he record students drinking? Khalil finally looked at me, and his eyes were filled with something I'd never seen there before. Guilt. Because he wasn't just recording them drinking, Trevor. He was recording what happened after, when they were too drunk to stand, when they couldn't consent to anything, when his voice broke. He looked away. My stomach lurched. No way. Mr. Brennan was everyone's favorite teacher. He sponsored the debate club. He wrote college recommendation letters. He'd helped me with my Georgetown application. He'd driven me home once when my car broke down, and we'd talked about history and politics, and he'd been cool, normal, safe. How do you know this? I demanded. Khalil's face flushed red. Because I helped him set up the cameras. The cafeteria noise faded into background static. All I could hear was my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. You what? Khalil was talking fast now, words tumbling out like he'd been holding them in for weeks. He asked me to help him before the trip. Said he needed to monitor students to make sure nobody got in trouble. Said it was for their own protection. He gave me these tiny wireless cameras and asked me to mount them in some of the rooms. He said they were just for security, in case something happened and we needed evidence. I stood up so fast, my chair scraped loudly across the floor. You put cameras in hotel rooms? Several people turned to look at us. Khalil grabbed my arm and pulled me back down. I thought it was legit. He's a teacher. Why would I question him? But after the trip, he showed me some of the footage and it wasn't security footage, Trevor. It was him in those rooms, with girls who were drunk, really drunk. And he was... Khalil couldn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Why didn't you report it? My voice came out harsh, angry. Khalil flinched. I tried. I went to Hayes, showed him the footage. He said he'd handle it. Said Brennan would be dealt with appropriately. That was 6 weeks ago. Nothing happened. Brennan kept teaching, kept showing up to school every day like normal. Hayes told me to delete the footage, said it could be misinterpreted, that involving police would destroy everyone's lives. I thought he was protecting the girls. I thought he was going to quietly fire Brennan, and that would be the end of it. My hands were shaking. So who leaked it today? If you deleted it? Khalil shook his head. I didn't delete it. I made copies first because I didn't trust Hayes, but I didn't leak it either. Someone else must have accessed the footage. Maybe Brennan had backups. Maybe Hayes kept copies. I don't know. But whoever leaked it sent it to everyone. The whole school, the media, the police. It's everywhere now. A teacher approached our table. Mrs. Kowalski, my chemistry teacher. She looked like she'd been crying. Trevor Martinez, you need to come with me. My blood ran cold. Why? She glanced at Khalil, then back at me. You set up the original shared drive for the trip photos. The police need to talk to you about access logs and account permissions. I stood up on legs that felt like water. Khalil grabbed my wrist. Don't tell them about the cameras. Not yet. Let me figure out how to explain it first. I pulled away from him. Figure it out? Khalil, you helped a teacher set up surveillance cameras to record students. There's no way to explain that. Mrs. Kowalski led me through empty hallways to the administrative wing. The normally busy office area was packed with police officers, school administrators, and people in suits who I assumed were lawyers. I was taken to a conference room where 2 detectives sat with laptops open. The woman introduced herself as Detective Laura Simmons. The man was Detective Rick Okafor. Simmons gestured to a chair. Sit down, Trevor. We need to ask you some questions about the shared drive you created for the senior trip. I sat. My mouth felt like sandpaper. Detective Okafor slid his laptop around to face me. Can you walk us through how you set up the drive? Who had access? When was it created? I explained the technical details. I'd created the drive 2 weeks before the trip, given access to everyone in the senior class plus the chaperones. It was supposed to be a simple way to collect and share photos. Nothing complicated. Simmons made notes while I talked. When I finished, she looked up. Did you upload the folder called Senior Trip Evidence? No. I saw it for the first time today in the gym. I clicked on it but only saw one video before security took my phone. Okafor leaned forward. What did you see in that video? I described it. The hotel room. Destiny, Jasmine, and Alicia drinking. Mr. Brennan entering with his own bottle. The timestamp. Simmons exchanged a look with Okafor. How long have you known about these recordings? I didn't know they existed until today. I swear. That was technically true. I hadn't known about Brennan's recordings, but I did know about Khalil's involvement. My silence felt like a lie. Simmons pulled out a tablet and showed me a screenshot. It was from the drive's activity log, showing who had accessed what files and when. Someone uploaded that folder at 9:17 this morning from an account belonging to Dr. Hayes, but the IP address trace shows the upload came from a computer in the library. Do you know who might have used Dr. Hayes' credentials to access the drive? I shook my head. Okafor tapped something on his laptop. There were 17 video files in that folder. Surveillance footage from multiple hotel rooms over multiple nights. The footage shows what appears to be systematic assault of incapacitated minors by Graham Brennan. The room tilted. Systematic. Multiple nights. Multiple rooms. How many girls? Simmons's expression was grim. We've identified 9 students in the footage so far. There may be more. Some of the videos show students who are clearly unconscious. Others show them unable to stand or speak coherently. In several videos, Brennan is providing alcohol, sometimes mixing drinks that we believe contained additional substances. Then she didn't finish. She didn't need to. Detective Okafor asked if I'd noticed anything unusual about Mr. Brennan's behavior during the trip. I thought back. He'd been friendly, energetic, always joking around with students. He'd organized group activities, made sure everyone was having fun. At night, he'd done room checks, said he wanted to make sure everyone was safe and following curfew. Nobody had questioned it. We'd thought it was normal chaperone behavior. Now every interaction felt sinister in retrospect. The way he'd lingered talking to certain girls, the way he'd volunteered to walk some students back to their rooms, the way he'd always had his phone out, recording group activities. We'd thought he was just documenting the trip for the yearbook. Simmons asked if I knew who else might have access to Hayes' email account. I said I didn't know, but then I remembered something. Hayes' daughter goes here. Senior. Whitney Brennan. I stopped. Okafor's head snapped up. Whitney Brennan? As in Graham Brennan's daughter? The pieces clicked together in my mind. Hayes and Brennan are friends. Like, actually friends outside of school. Their families do barbecues together. Whitney would have access to both her dad's computer and Hayes' information if they're that close. The detectives looked at each other. Simmons stood up. Stay here. Don't leave this room. They walked out, leaving me alone with my thoughts racing. Whitney Brennan was quiet, kept to herself, member of photography club. I'd worked with her on yearbook stuff. She was good with computers, great with editing software. If she'd wanted to access her father's computer or Hayes' account, she'd have the skills. But why would she leak evidence of her own father's crimes? 20 minutes passed. Through the conference room window, I watched more police arrive. An ambulance pulled up, then another. They were bringing in the victims, I realized. The girls from the videos. Making sure they were okay, getting medical examinations. I felt sick. These were people I knew. Destiny, who I'd debated against in Model UN. Jasmine, who'd been my lab partner in biology. Alicia, who sat next to me in calculus. I'd seen them every day since we got back from the trip and never noticed anything wrong. The door opened and Simmons came back in with a woman in an FBI jacket. Trevor, this is Special Agent Reeves. She's with the Crimes Against Children unit. She needs to ask you some follow-up questions. Agent Reeves sat down and opened a laptop. We've confirmed that Whitney Brennan used Dr. Hayes' credentials to upload the folder. She's currently at a police station in the next county. She drove there immediately after making the upload and turned herself in. She's provided a voluntary statement explaining everything. Reeves pulled up a document on her screen. According to Whitney's statement, she discovered the videos on her father's personal computer 2 weeks ago. She confronted him about them. He told her the footage was taken out of context, that the students had invited him to party with them, that nothing illegal occurred. She didn't believe him. She copied all the files and waited for the right opportunity to expose what he'd done. She chose today because it's 6 weeks since she reported the situation to Dr. Hayes and nothing had been done. My brain was struggling to process this. Whitney had known for 2 weeks that her father was a predator, had been living in the same house with him, acting normal at school, and then she'd systematically destroyed his life and Hayes' career in one calculated upload. Agent Reeves continued. Whitney also provided recordings of conversations between her father and Dr. Hayes, discussing how to manage the situation. Hayes apparently agreed to keep it quiet in exchange for Brennan's resignation at the end of the school year. He told Brennan to delete the videos. Obviously, Brennan didn't comply. Detective Okafor returned to the room. Trevor, I need to ask you directly. Did anyone else help Graham Brennan create or manage these recordings? My throat closed up. Khalil's face flashed in my mind. His confession about mounting the cameras, his terror in the cafeteria. If I stayed silent, would that make me complicit? But if I told them, Khalil's life was over. He'd go to prison. He'd be labeled a sex offender. His future would be destroyed. But wasn't that deserved? He'd helped a predator surveil victims, even if he hadn't known the true purpose. I don't know, I said finally. The lie tasted like acid. Simmons studied my face. If you're protecting someone, now is the time to tell us. Anyone who assisted in these crimes, even unknowingly, needs to come forward. It will go better for them if they cooperate now, rather than us discovering their involvement through investigation. I kept my expression neutral. I don't know anything about who helped him. I'm sorry. Simmons didn't look convinced, but she nodded. Okay, you're free to go back to the cafeteria. Stay available. We may have more questions. I walked back through the hallways in a daze. The cafeteria was even more chaotic than before. Parents had started arriving to pick up their kids. Teachers were trying to maintain order, but failing. I found Khalil sitting in the same spot, his head in his hands. When he saw me, he stood up quickly. What did they ask? I pulled him into the hallway where we could talk semi-privately. They know Whitney leaked it. They know Hayes covered it up. They asked if I knew who helped Brennan with the cameras. Khalil's face went pale. What did you say? I said I didn't know. Khalil's whole body sagged with relief. Thank you. God, thank you. I grabbed his shirt. Don't thank me. You need to turn yourself in before they figure it out. Tell them you didn't know what the cameras were for. Tell them Brennan lied to you. They might go easy on you if you cooperate. Khalil shook his head frantically. Are you insane? They'll charge me as an accomplice. I'll go to prison. I'll be registered as a sex offender for the rest of my life. My entire future will be destroyed. Your future deserves to be destroyed, I said, and the words came out harsher than I intended. You helped him set up surveillance on 9 girls. 9, Khalil. And you knew Hayes was covering it up and you stayed quiet. Khalil's eyes filled with tears. I thought Hayes was handling it. I thought he was protecting people by keeping it quiet. I didn't know he was just protecting Brennan. I was trying to do the right thing by reporting it. I let go of his shirt. The right thing would have been going to the police when Hayes did nothing. You had evidence of crimes and you sat on it for 6 weeks. I was scared, Khalil whispered. I'm still scared. Please, Trevor. We've been friends since we were 12. You can't tell them. I looked at my best friend and saw a stranger. Someone who'd prioritized his own comfort over justice for victims. Someone who'd let a predator walk free because confronting the truth was too hard. I'm not telling them, I said finally. But you need to. Today. Because when they figure it out on their own, and they will, it's going to be so much worse for you. Khalil wiped his eyes. I need time to think. There's no time. They're going through everything right now. Security footage, computer logs, phone records. They're going to trace those cameras back to you. You have maybe hours before they knock on your door. Khalil pulled out his phone, the one he'd apparently managed to keep hidden from security. I'll delete everything. All the messages between me and Brennan, all the evidence. I stared at him in disbelief. You really don't get it. Deleting evidence makes it worse. It proves consciousness of guilt. Before Khalil could respond, a commotion erupted near the cafeteria entrance. Teachers were shouting. Students were crowding around the doors. I pushed through the crowd and saw Graham Brennan being led through the main hallway in handcuffs. His face was pale, his eyes darting around at the students watching. When he saw me, recognition flashed across his face. He'd driven me home that time, had helped me with my college essay, had seemed like a good guy, someone who actually cared about students. Now I understood that care had been camouflage for something monstrous. Behind Brennan, more officers were escorting Dr. Hayes out in handcuffs. Hayes was crying, actual tears running down his face, saying something about having been trying to protect everyone, that this was a misunderstanding. Students were recording on their phones, capturing everything. By tonight, this would be everywhere. Social media would explode, national news would pick it up. Riverdale High would become famous for all the wrong reasons, and 9 girls would have their trauma broadcast to the world. Agent Reeves approached me again. Trevor, we're going to need you to come down to the station later to give a formal statement. Your parents have been called. They're on their way. I nodded numbly. My phone was still confiscated, but I could see parents' reactions as they arrived and learned what had happened. Mothers crying, fathers furious, everyone in shock. The school security guards were trying to keep media out, but reporters were already approaching students leaving the building, shoving microphones in traumatized teenagers' faces, asking how they felt about their teacher being a predator. I saw Destiny's mom arrive, her face already streaked with tears. She must have gotten a call from police before coming. She pushed through the crowd looking for her daughter. When she found Destiny in the cafeteria, sitting with Jasmine and Alicia, she collapsed next to them. All 3 girls and Destiny's mom just held each other and cried. Other parents found their daughters. Some reactions were supportive, others were angry, demanding to know why their daughters had been drinking, why they'd put themselves in that situation. Victim blaming starting already, before the girls had even been able to process what happened to them. Khalil appeared next to me again. His face had changed. Something in his expression had hardened. I'm not turning myself in, he said quietly. I'm going to let them find out. If they find out, maybe they won't. Maybe the evidence got lost in everything else. I turned to face him fully. You're really going to do this? You're going to let Whitney take all the heat for being brave enough to expose this while you hide like a coward? Khalil's jaw clenched. Whitney's a hero. Everyone's saying so. She'll be fine. But me? I'll be destroyed. You don't understand what it's like being a black kid caught up in something like this. The system won't give me a second chance. He had a point. The racial dynamics of the justice system were undeniable. Khalil would face harsher consequences than a white student might. But that didn't change the fundamental truth. You still need to do the right thing, I said. Khalil shook his head. The right thing is keeping my mouth shut and hoping for the best. That's survival. You wouldn't understand because you don't have to. He walked away before I could respond. My parents arrived an hour later. My mom immediately pulled me into a hug. My dad looked shell-shocked. They'd obviously been told something about what happened, but probably not the full details. Are you okay? Mom asked, searching my face for signs of trauma. I'm fine. I wasn't involved in any of it. I just ran the photo drive. Dad cleared his throat. The police said they need you to give a statement about computer access and technical details. We're going with you. At the police station, I gave my formal statement about setting up the drive, who had access, how the system worked. I didn't mention Khalil. The detectives asked again if I knew anything about the cameras. I said no. The lie was getting easier each time, which made me feel worse. When we finished, Agent Reeves pulled my parents aside. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but their expressions grew more horrified with each word. They must have been learning the full scope of what Brennan had done. We drove home in silence. When we got to the house, my mom finally spoke. They said there were 9 victims, 9 girls who were assaulted while unconscious. Trevor, these were your classmates, people you knew. Her voice broke. Did you notice anything? Any warning signs? I thought about all the interactions I'd witnessed between Brennan and female students, the way he'd compliment them, the way he'd offer to help with homework during lunch, the way he'd always volunteer to chaperone trips and dances. In retrospect, everything looked sinister, but at the time, it had just seemed like a teacher who actually cared. He was good at hiding it, I said finally. He made everyone trust him. My dad's hands tightened on the steering wheel, and the principal knew. The principal knew and did nothing. How many other administrators knew? How long has this been going on? Those were the questions everyone would be asking. How many other victims were there? How many times had complaints been dismissed? How many people had seen something concerning and chosen to stay quiet? The news broke nationally that evening. I watched from my couch as CNN ran a story about a Maryland high school where a teacher had systematically assaulted students during a school trip. They didn't name Brennan or the school yet because of the ongoing investigation, but it was only a matter of time. Social media was already filled with speculation. Students from Riverdale were posting their own theories, sharing screenshots of messages describing their interactions with Brennan. The school's name would be public by morning. My phone, which I'd finally gotten back from police, wouldn't stop buzzing. Group chats I was part of were exploding with messages. People sharing the videos that had been leaked. I wanted to tell them to stop, that sharing the videos was re-victimizing the girls, but I knew it wouldn't matter. Once something went online, it lived forever. Those 9 girls would have to live with knowing their assault had been watched by hundreds, maybe thousands of people. Around 10 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number, I answered cautiously. Trevor, this is Whitney Brennan. Her voice was calm, steady, not at all what I expected from someone who'd just destroyed her own father's life. I wanted to thank you for not making the story about you. A lot of people would have tried to get attention from this. You didn't. I noticed. I didn't know what to say. Finally, you did something incredibly brave, turning in your own father. Whitney was quiet for a moment. He stopped being my father the moment I saw what he did to those girls. The person I thought was my dad doesn't exist. He was always this monster. I just didn't know. She paused. The FBI agent told me you run the photo drive. I wanted you to know I tried to target the leak so only school officials and police would see it first. But someone else got access and spread it everywhere before I could control it. That wasn't my intention. I never wanted the victim's assault to go viral. How did someone else get access? I asked. Whitney sighed. I don't know. Maybe Hayes had already shared the links with someone before I uploaded everything. Maybe the school's IT security is just that bad. But either way, it's out there now and I can't take it back. Those girls are suffering more because of me. Her voice finally cracked. I thought I was helping them, but I might have made everything worse. I wanted to tell her she'd done the right thing, that exposure was necessary for justice. But I thought about Destiny crying in her mother's arms, about Jasmine's face when she realized everyone had seen her assault, about Alicia, who'd have to return to school knowing her classmates had watched the worst moment of her life. The victims will survive this, I said, hoping it was true. And your evidence means Brennan and Hayes will actually face consequences. That wouldn't have happened without you. Whitney sniffled. My mom left him tonight, took my little brother and moved in with my grandmother. She said she can't look at him, can't believe she was married to someone capable of this. My whole family is destroyed. I didn't know how to respond to that. Her family was destroyed, but 9 other families were destroyed too. The difference was, those 9 families were innocent victims. Whitney's father had chosen to be a predator. I'm sorry you're going through this, I said finally. Don't be sorry for me, Whitney replied. Be sorry for the girls he hurt. Be sorry for all the other victims who haven't come forward yet. Because there will be more. My dad kept notebooks, dating back years, names, dates, photos. The FBI has them now. They're identifying more victims. This is so much bigger than just the senior trip. She hung up before I could respond. I sat there, staring at my phone. Years of victims. Notebooks full of names. How many girls had Graham Brennan assaulted during his teaching career? How many times had administrators been told and done nothing? How many parents had raised concerns and been dismissed? The scope of the crime was staggering. And it had continued because people chose comfort over confrontation, chose protecting institutional reputation over protecting children. The next day, I returned to school for what administrators were calling a community healing assembly. The auditorium was packed with students, parents, teachers, counselors, and district officials. The new interim principal, Dr. Rebecca Singh, stood at the podium. She'd been pulled from another school to replace Hayes. She looked exhausted already. I want to start by saying that what happened to our students should never have happened. It represents a systematic failure of our duty to protect you. We failed. I failed, even though I wasn't here. The system failed, and we are going to do better. Parents shouted questions. How could this happen? Why weren't there better safety protocols? What oversight existed for chaperones? Who else knew? Dr. Singh answered as best she could, but the truth was that nobody had good answers. Brennan had been a predator hiding in plain sight, protected by institutional trust in teachers and by an administrator more concerned with avoiding scandal than confronting abuse. The assembly dissolved into chaos as people argued about accountability and policy changes. I spotted Khalil near the back of the auditorium, trying to make himself invisible. He saw me looking and quickly looked away. We hadn't spoken since yesterday. That friendship felt broken beyond repair. How could I trust someone who'd helped create the conditions for assault and then prioritized his own safety over justice? Agent Reeves stood near the entrance talking to uniformed officers. They were scanning the crowd, watching students, looking for someone. My stomach dropped. They'd figured out about the cameras. Reeves made eye contact with me and gestured for me to come over. I walked toward her on legs that felt like lead. She kept her voice low. We traced the camera equipment. The purchase was made through a school account, but the equipment was signed out to a student, Khalil Johnson. We need to talk to him. Do you know where he is? I could lie, say I hadn't seen him, but then I saw Destiny sitting in the front row with her parents, her face hollow and aged beyond her 17 years. I saw Jasmine sobbing into her mother's shoulder. I saw Alicia staring at nothing, completely dissociated. He's here, I said quietly. Back left corner, gray hoodie. Reeves nodded and signaled to other officers. They moved through the crowd toward Khalil. I watched his face change as he realized what was happening. Terror. Panic. He tried to stand, maybe thinking he could run, but there was nowhere to go. Officers surrounded him. The auditorium went quiet as everyone watched Khalil being escorted out. His mother screamed, demanding to know what was happening. His father tried to follow, but was stopped by security. Khalil looked back at me as they led him away. The betrayal in his eyes was like a physical blow, but I'd made my choice. I'd chosen the victims over my friendship. I'd chosen justice over loyalty, and I'd do it again, even though it felt like dying. The assembly ended shortly after. Parents pulled their kids out, not trusting the school anymore. Teachers resigned, not wanting to be associated with Riverdale. The school district brought in outside investigators to review every complaint filed in the past decade, looking for patterns of dismissed allegations. The criminal trials took months to organize. Brennan faced 23 charges related to the 9 identified victims from the senior trip, plus 12 more charges for assaults dating back 5 years. Hayes was charged with obstruction of justice, failure to report child abuse, and official misconduct. Khalil was charged as an accessory to assault for his role in mounting the cameras, though his lawyer argued he'd been manipulated by a trusted authority figure and shouldn't face the same consequences as the actual predator. I was called to testify at Brennan's trial, had to sit in that courtroom and describe the shared drive, the folder structure, what I'd seen in the videos before my phone was confiscated. Defense attorney tried to discredit my testimony, suggesting I'd misinterpreted what I'd witnessed. Prosecutor played the full videos for the jury. You could hear people in the gallery crying. Jurors looked physically ill. One had to be excused because she was sobbing too hard to continue. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, devastating. Destiny testified about her experience, or lack of experience. She couldn't remember most of that night, just fragments, feeling dizzy, the room spinning, waking up with bruises and pain and no clear memory of how she'd gotten them. She described the nightmares that started after returning from the trip, the panic attacks, the way she'd scrub her skin in the shower until it bled, trying to feel clean. She'd dropped out of Georgetown after one semester, unable to function in classes. Her full scholarship was gone, her future derailed, all because a teacher she'd trusted had seen her as prey. Jasmine's testimony was shorter because she broke down crying so hard she couldn't continue. Her therapist had to testify instead, describing the severe PTSD, the suicide attempt, the eating disorder that developed as Jasmine tried to exert control over her body after having that control violently stripped away. Alicia couldn't testify in person. Her statement was read by the prosecutor, while Alicia listened from a separate room via video link. She described not being able to trust anyone anymore, not male teachers, not authority figures, not even her own memories because they'd been so thoroughly compromised by whatever Brennan had drugged her with. The defense's strategy was to claim the girls had willingly participated in drinking with Brennan, that they'd invited him to their rooms, that he'd made a poor judgment call but hadn't committed assault because they'd been willing participants. The prosecutor destroyed this argument by playing footage showing the girls clearly unconscious, unable to respond, completely incapacitated. No reasonable person could watch that evidence and believe consent had been present. The jury deliberated for 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all 23 charges. Brennan's sentencing hearing was packed. Victims filled the gallery, ready to give impact statements. Destiny went first. She stood at the podium and looked directly at Brennan, who couldn't meet her eyes. "You stole my future," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "You stole my sense of safety. You stole my ability to trust. You stole my body's autonomy. You stole memories I'll never get back. You stole my scholarship and my education. You stole pieces of my soul that I'll spend the rest of my life trying to recover. I hope you rot in prison knowing that you destroyed 17 innocent lives for your own sick gratification." 9 victims gave similar statements, each one more heartbreaking than the last. Parents testified about watching their daughters transform from confident young women into traumatized shells. Teachers testified about the institutional failures that had enabled Brennan's predation for so many years. The judge listened to everything without expression. When the victim's statements ended, she turned to Brennan. "Do you have anything to say before I impose sentence?" Brennan stood slowly. His lawyer tried to object, but Brennan waved him off. "I want to apologize," Brennan said, and several people in the gallery shouted in anger. The judge banged her gavel for order. Brennan continued, "I know my apologies mean nothing now. I know I've caused irreparable harm. I betrayed the trust placed in me as an educator. I violated the sacred duty to protect students. I destroyed lives that deserved to flourish. There's no excuse for what I did, no explanation that makes it acceptable. I'm a monster, and I'll have to live with that knowledge for the rest of my life." The judge's expression remained cold. "Mr. Brennan, your words might sound remorseful, but your actions over many years demonstrate a calculated pattern of predatory behavior. You didn't make one mistake. You systematically targeted vulnerable students, groomed them, isolated them, assaulted them, and collected evidence of your crimes like trophies. Then you allowed them to blame themselves, to question their own memories, to suffer in silence. You're only sorry now because you got caught. I'm sentencing you to 32 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. You will be required to register as a sex offender for life. You will never be allowed contact with minors. You will spend the prime years of your remaining life behind bars, which is still far less than what you deserve." Hayes' trial was shorter, but no less damning. Evidence showed he'd received complaints about Brennan dating back 5 years, had dismissed each one, had actively discouraged victims from pursuing formal allegations. He'd prioritized protecting the school's reputation over protecting students. His defense was that he'd believed Brennan's explanations, that he'd thought he was handling the situation appropriately through internal discipline. The jury didn't buy it. He was convicted of obstruction of justice and official misconduct. The judge sentenced him to 8 years plus permanent revocation of all educational credentials. Khalil's trial was the hardest to watch. His defense presented evidence that he'd been manipulated by Brennan, that he'd been a 17-year-old student who'd trusted an authority figure, that he'd tried to report the crimes to Hayes, but had been shut down. The prosecutor countered that Khalil had continued to stay silent even after Hayes did nothing, that he'd prioritized self-preservation over victim protection, that he'd deleted evidence once the investigation started. Character witnesses described him as a good student, a good friend, someone who made a terrible mistake, but didn't deserve to have his life destroyed. I wasn't called to testify at Khalil's trial, but I attended every day, watched him sit at the defense table looking small and scared. His parents held hands in the gallery, both crying constantly. His little sister, who was only 12, couldn't understand why her brother was being called a criminal. The jury deliberated for 2 days. I held my breath, waiting for the verdict. Finally, they returned. Guilty of being an accessory after the fact, not guilty of conspiracy. The judge had discretion in sentencing. She could send Khalil to prison, or she could show mercy. "Mr. Johnson," the judge said at sentencing, "you were placed in an impossible situation by an adult who abused his authority. I believe you were manipulated. However, your decision to remain silent after learning the truth, your decision to prioritize your own future over justice for victims, cannot be excused. You had opportunities to do the right thing and you chose not to. But I also recognize that you're young, that you've shown genuine remorse, and that sending you to prison would serve no rehabilitative purpose. I'm sentencing you to 5 years probation, 2,000 hours of community service focused on victim advocacy, and mandatory sex offender registration for 10 years. If you complete your probation successfully, the registration requirement may be reduced." Khalil sobbed with relief. His parents rushed to hug him. 5 years probation wasn't nothing, but it wasn't prison. He'd still have a future, though it would be marked by his conviction. I felt conflicted watching his reaction. Part of me thought he deserved worse. Part of me remembered the 12-year-old kid who'd been my best friend, who'd helped me through my parents' divorce, who'd stayed up all night with me when my dog died. People were complicated. Justice was complicated. Nothing about this situation was simple. The school district settled civil lawsuits with all 17 identified victims for a total of $14 million. The money wouldn't undo the trauma, but it provided resources for therapy, education, rebuilding lives. New policies were implemented, mandatory multiple chaperones on all trips, cameras in common areas only, immediate police reporting for any allegations of abuse, independent oversight of administrative decisions. The policies felt inadequate, performative, but they were something. Small steps toward preventing future predators from finding easy prey. Whitney Brennan transferred to a different school district, trying to escape the notoriety. She'd been hailed as a hero by victims' advocates, but also harassed relentlessly by people who thought she should have protected her father. She deleted all social media and disappeared from public view. I tried reaching out once to thank her for her courage, but got no response. I hoped she was okay, hoped she understood that what she'd done mattered immensely, even if it had cost her everything. Graduation happened 3 months after the trials ended. The ceremony was subdued, missing the usual celebration. Too many students were carrying trauma that made joy feel impossible. Destiny gave a modified valedictorian speech about survival and resilience. She talked about how the worst experiences of our lives could become catalysts for growth if we refuse to let them define us. She announced she was reapplying to Georgetown, taking back the future that had been stolen from her. The crowd gave her a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. I went to college studying digital forensics and victim advocacy, inspired by everything I'd witnessed. Spent my career helping build cases against predators who thought technology made them untouchable. I saw patterns everywhere. Teachers, coaches, religious leaders, family members, all using similar grooming tactics, all counting on institutional protection and victim silence. I learned that cases like ours were rare, not because predators were rare, but because most victims never got justice. Most Whitneys chose loyalty over truth. Most Khalils chose silence over disclosure. Most victims suffered alone. 5 years after the trial, I got an email from Destiny. She'd graduated from Georgetown with honors, gotten into law school, was planning to specialize in prosecuting sex crimes. She wrote, "I wanted you to know that what you did mattered. You could have protected your friend. You chose to protect us instead. That choice gave me hope that good people exist, that justice is possible, that speaking up makes a difference. Thank you for being brave when it counted." I read that email 3 times, feeling something shift in my chest. The guilt I'd carried about Khalil lightened slightly. The doubt about whether I'd done the right thing faded. Khalil and I never reconciled. He completed his probation, moved across the country, changed his name legally. I heard through former mutual friends that he worked in tech support, kept his head down, avoided anything that might draw attention. He'd survived, but was permanently marked by his choices during that week when everything exploded. I didn't wish him ill, but I also couldn't forgive him. Some betrayals were too fundamental. He'd had evidence of crimes and chosen personal safety over victim protection. That calculation revealed something about character that couldn't be undone. Whitney reached out 7 years later. She was in graduate school studying psychology, specifically trauma recovery. She wrote, "I wanted you to know I'm okay. It took years of therapy, but I've processed what happened, what my father did, what I did by exposing him. I struggle with the knowledge that my evidence caused additional trauma to the victims when it went viral, but I also know that without exposure, Brennan would still be teaching. Hayes would still be covering up abuse. More girls would have been victimized. I made the right choice even though it was the hardest thing I've ever done. I hope you found peace too." I responded, "You saved lives by having the courage to destroy your own family. That's heroism most people can't imagine. The victim's additional trauma from exposure wasn't your fault. It was the fault of every person who chose to share and sensationalize rather than respect their privacy. You did what was necessary for justice. That matters more than anything else." She wrote back with just 3 words. "Thank you." Finally, I understood what she meant. After years of being vilified by some and praised by others, she needed someone to simply acknowledge the impossible burden she'd carried. The story became a case study in criminal justice classes, in ethics courses, in education policy discussions. How do you protect students from predators who hide behind institutional trust? How do you balance privacy with safety? When does loyalty become complicity? The answers weren't simple, but the core truth remained. Silence protects perpetrators. Speaking up, even when it costs everything, is the only path to justice. Whitney understood that. The victims understood that. Eventually, I understood that too. 10 years after those texts flooded my phone telling me to delete everything, I work with advocacy organizations training educators to recognize grooming behaviors, teaching students about consent and reporting, helping institutions build systems that prioritize protection over reputation. The work feels like penance for the hours I stayed silent about Khalil's involvement, for the moments I considered protecting my friend over helping victims. I can't undo those hours, but I can spend the rest of my career making sure other victims have better options than the ones Destiny, Jasmine, Alicia, and 14 others faced. The shared drive I created for innocent trip photos became evidence in one of Maryland's largest cases of institutional sexual abuse. That digital trail exposed a predator, destroyed a cover-up, and gave 17 victims the justice they deserved. Technology can facilitate abuse, but it can also expose it. Documentation matters. Evidence matters. And having the courage to use that evidence, even when it destroys everything familiar, matters most of all. Whitney Brennan understood that truth better than anyone. She chose justice over family, exposure over silence, victims over comfort. She was 17 years old and braver than most adults I've known. Her choice that morning changed everything, shattered lives but also rebuilt them, destroyed but also created. That's what justice looks like in the real world. Messy, costly, necessary, and worth every sacrifice. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.